At 7 years old, my parents got divorced, and that divorce process was pretty challenging and complicated. It was in and out of court battles. I found myself in a space where I was in between two worlds. I was going to Williamsburg for Shabbasim and speaking Yiddish and wearing a denim skirt, which I probably shouldn't have had at that point, and going home where my mother started wearing jeans. A common question that people always asked me was, how did you stay from? Why did you decide to stay from? You didn't have to. You could have gone and done whatever you wanted. Like, you live by your mother's not from, shine, you go to public school. Like, why choose to stay from? And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know. But
we've discussed what happens when one's child leaves the faith or goes off the derech. By the way, I'm Yaakov Langer, and this is Inspiration for the Nation, if you haven't realized yet. But what does a child do when one of their parents decides that Orthodox Judaism isn't just the way for them? Especially young children, how do they cope? Meet Henchy Cohen, who grew up with this dilemma. She originally came from a Chasidish home, but when her mother decided to leave, everything changed. This episode is in memory of Shimon David ben Yaakov Shleima and Miriam Sarah bas Yaakov Moshe. This episode is Refuah Shleima Yosef Chaim ben Devorah Chaya Golda. This episode is powered by Wheels to Lease, United Refuah HealthShare, BitBean, and Hiring for Less. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do. 2026 will be our biggest year yet, Mirz Hashem, with Hashem's help, and we want to ensure that you get all the top podcast guests in the Jewish world. Here we go. Henchy, thank you so much for coming in to do this. Could you take me through your childhood?
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
Where to start?
Where do you grow up?
I grew up in Borough Park.
Okay.
And we moved around a lot in Borough Park, so don't ask me an address because I don't have gotten any. Growing up in Borough Park, we lived there until about 5th grade. My parents both grew up from Chasidish backgrounds. My dad was from Williamsburg, which, if you know, it's pretty Chasidish. And Borough Park in itself is also a pretty Chasidish community where my mom grew up as well. And I went to Chasidish school up until 3rd grade, 4th grade in Borough Park. And then we moved to Muncie. But a lot of the changes that happened in my life transitioned and started in Borough Park in middle school. At 7 years old, my parents got divorced, and that divorce process was pretty challenging and complicated. And it was in and out of court battles up until like my sister was in high school and she's 6 years younger than me. We were never, thank God, had to be brought into court at all. But the divorce took up a lot of our life. And in 5th grade, we relocated to Muncie. And my mother started transitioning to a different lifestyle change that suited her more, based off of her own story, which I'm not going to share. But it was interesting because I found myself in a space where I was in between two worlds. I was going to Williamsburg for Shabbasim and speaking Yiddish and wearing a denim skirt, which I probably shouldn't have had at that point, and going home where my mother started wearing jeans. And that was my norm. And it was so interesting because when my mother started transitioning to not be religious anymore, like I said earlier, knowing somebody who wasn't from, it was like hush hush. It was a fairy tale. It was like a baba masa that like nobody spoke about. And if you knew somebody, it was like a distant cousin. And here I am in like direct line of like, I know somebody who's not religious, but we're just not going to talk about it because it's not a conversation you bring up. It's something embarrassed. It's shameful. It's not something that people are proud of to talk about the way people are so open about it now in people's journeys and relationship with Hashem is a lot more highlighted as subjective. And that came with a lot of like adaptability and challenges on my end, like learning to figure out who I am and where do I stand at such a young age, because I could really be caught up, right? Like nobody's giving me the pressure to be from because we were living by my mom. But at the same time, I've been exposed up until my life as being a religious person and keeping Shabbos and having a relationship with Hashem on a practical and halachic level. And I definitely had to grow up faster than my peers. There was a lot of maturity going on that was scenarios that I had to handle, going to my dad and having my siblings and having to take care of my younger sister who was baby at that time. Having to learn about what I want to be strong in and what do I want to keep. And that was really like my main growth from like, I would say 10 to 15 years old was like a period of like scenarios of my life. Like I remember, I don't know how old I was, but I was talking to this girl and we were really good friends. And she told me her mother didn't want me to be friends with me anymore. And I understood it. Which was like, so I remember thinking to myself, like, Henchy, why do you understand that? Like, why are you okay with this? Like, why are you so like, okay that her mother told not to be friends with? You're you're nice, you're like a good friend. Like, and I'm like, because they don't understand it. So like, what, I'm going to be angry at her mother for not understanding a situation that she has no idea. Cause back then, like if somebody's not from, if you're near them, like it's like poison, it's going to infiltrate. Like I can't blame her for that.
Can you give me context in terms of what actual year did your parents get divorced? And to explain to, I guess, our audience who doesn't really know the Chasidish community so well, like what does that mean back then and obviously now, like in that world?
So my parents got divorced when I was 7. I was in first grade or second grade. I bounced around to a lot of different schools, so trying to remember which school this happened in. But within the Chasidish community back then, divorce is also still not so common. Definitely the only girl whose parents were divorced, as far as I knew. Later on in the years, it's actually funny seeing my classmates back then, whose parents now have like gone on their own journeys. But back then, nobody else was divorced. Definitely, at least from my understanding. And then when my mother started not becoming religious, which happened when I was around 5th grade, that was also unheard of. And within the context of the Chasidish community, I think it was similar overall in the religious world, like in Yaakov's too, or whatever yeshiva shlotish communities, divorce was just not so common or not as spoken about. So I think it was pretty similar in that regard. But that I didn't find had such a hard, again, it was so weird that I was so okay with it and I understood it so deeply. And I thank Hashem to this day for like my understanding and clarity, because I think that's what ends up helping me in my own career of helping other people. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm curious. Where did that strength come from? Do you know?
So it's actually funny. I was in seminary and I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to therapy because I want to get married and I want to make sure that all like my like dust and dirt is out in the open so I can get over things. And I remember a common question that people always ask me was, how did you stay from? Why did you decide to stay from? You didn't have to. You could have gone and done whatever you wanted. Like you're living by your mother. Your mother's not from. Shine. You go to public school. Like why choose to stay from? And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know. But something stuck with me throughout my entire life, which was my fondest memory growing up was seeing my mother light Shabbos candles and sing on the couch. Like we would always sing Chadidi. We used to sing old A.B. Rottenberg songs and Journey songs. And that was kind of like my safe space. So whenever I thought about Shabbos, I felt safe. So whenever Shabbos came, like that was my connection. And my relationship with Hashem also at that time was also very interesting because at that time, like, who's Hashem? What is Hashem? Like some fantasy thing in the sky. I don't know. He was my imaginary friend. I would get frustrated. I would literally talk to an invisible person and be like, Hashem, I know you know everything that's going on right now, but like, I need to vent. Like, this is so frustrating. So when it came to a point where I had to make a choice, right? Because 5th grade, I've gone through the divorce process already. So my life has been pretty up and down. And Hashem was my biggest strength. It was my biggest support system. Even if I didn't view him as a godly figure, but he was the person I turned to. So even if I had the choice to turn my back on him, why would I do that if that's the only thing that's keeping me sane? And I only found that out later on and put the dots together. But ultimately, I think that's where it came. It was the safe space that I actually created through memories, creating with my mother, which is like super ironic, and using Hashem as my support system. Like I didn't have anybody to talk to. Who on earth is going to understand the situation other than him? Because he put me in it. I couldn't talk to my friends about it. I couldn't talk to like I didn't want pity. Like I literally, like, the biggest trigger for me is when somebody tells me, here's about my life, and it's like, I never, like, so your mother's not from, like, it must have been so hard for you. And like in my bones just like, what do you mean? Like, this is my life. Like, I'm not a nebuch. Like, no, like, my mother's amazing. My father's amazing. She made a choice. Like, so, like, so I couldn't really talk to anybody. And I don't know, therapy. I don't know. I don't remember if therapy ever came up, but like, I don't think I would have even like gone to that route because I didn't feel like I needed a therapist. I just needed to like get it out and then move on. So that's who Hashem was for me. And that's how I ended up using him, and till today, as somebody who I turn to for anything that went on.
Really powerful. Very often when parents get divorced, especially when the kids are younger, the kids tend to, without anyone saying anything, they tend to blame themselves. Obviously not knowing, all the details and stuff, but that's just naturally like, oh, like it's something I did. Did you feel that?
Didn't.
No. How about your siblings?
I don't know.
Let's call them up. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I say, right. So me and my brother are a year apart or so, like 12 months apart. And my sister and I are 6 years apart. And they had very different journeys with my parents that I did. My siblings chose, and again, this is their journey to share, but they stopped being a part of my dad's life for quite a few years, whereas I continued. And I think my entire life from the divorce, again, this weird clarity that Hashem gave me, which was like, I knew, even when my mother sat me down at 7 years old saying, okay, like they're getting a divorce. What did I know what divorce was? But like, it just made sense. Okay, they weren't right for each other. It was definitely hard. With divorce, unfortunately, a lot of like dirty things come out. And I feel like dirty is the wrong word, but like just sad things come out, pitting things come out, remarks are made from other people, from family members that just can be very painful. So the divorce process itself was hard, but it was never a reflection of, okay, it was because of me. My parents did an amazing job at making me feel loved regardless of what was going on. So I never thought it was a reflection on what I did or something that had to do with me.
We'll be right back to this episode, but I want to tell you something amazing. Ellie was very interested in learning about a particular organization which is said to have saved Klal Yisrael tens of millions of dollars. So naturally, Ellie, by the way, Ellie, my brother, being the curious George that he is, reached out to the organization's CEO and said, is this for real? The answer, after extensive research, is yes. Ellie ended up sitting down with Rabbi Moshe Katz of United Refuah Health Share to find out what a health share even is and why people should care to learn more. No, it was not a paid episode because we don't do paid episodes at Living L'Chaim. Wildly, that episode across all the Living L'Chaim platforms has resulted in tens of thousands of views and listens, causing the phones at United Refuah to ring off the hook and their inboxes to flood in a good way. So props to all you inquiring with them. Now, United Refuah wants us to keep pushing this message in a commercial, which is what I'm doing right here on Inspiration for the Nation. For many, a health share makes so much sense. You can potentially save tens of thousands of dollars every year when compared to other healthcare options. Keep more in your pocket for Simchas and your family's priorities. It's totally normal to have questions, which is why I encourage you to listen to the insightful Kosher Money episode where Rabbi Katz answers those very questions. The link to the episode and United Refuah's website is in the show notes. By the way, Kosher Money is hosted by my brother, so please be nice to him or else. And before we dive back in, I need to talk to you about something. Hiring locally can be costly, with hourly rates often ranging from $20 to $50, not to mention the difficulty of finding someone skilled and immediately available. But what if there was a smarter, more affordable option? Meet Hiring for Less, the ultimate solution for hiring dedicated, full-time remote employees from overseas. For just $7 an hour or $280 a week, imagine a 9-to-5 employee in your time zone, fluent in English, and experienced in exactly what you need. Hiring for Less has successfully connected employers with talented professionals in fields such as customer service, real estate, bookkeeping, data entry, cold calling, photo and video editing, architectural design, help with AI, e-com support, personal assistance, and more specialized roles. Hiring for Less doesn't stop at recruitment. They also help you with training and best practices to seamlessly integrate your new employee into your team. Plus, no contracts, no hidden fees, or upfront costs. Just unbeatable value at $7 an hour. Special offer. Mention Living L'Chaim to get your first week at 50% off. Call, text, or WhatsApp 845-682-0990 or visit hiring4less.com today to get started. Of course, links in the show notes. Now, back to this week's episode.
How did you, as you're getting older, balance those two very different worlds?
Took a lot of creativity. As the years goes on and different scenarios come up, you definitely have to get creative. So, for example, it came time to go to high school, and I would interview at certain high schools in Muncie, and my mother would come with me to the interviews, and she would wear what she would wear, and I wouldn't ask her to change because this is who she is. Why should she change? Like, she's showing up to help me get into schools. Like, in my head, I was just grateful that she was supportive enough to help me apply for schools. And I remember that one person looked at her and like he didn't even like have me read Chumash. He's just like, okay, you're just not a good fit. And I was like, going to school that's not going to take me for who I am and what I want, and I don't need to be here because I don't need to be in a place that's narrow-minded. Like, education and Yiddishkeit is subjective, and if you're not going to look at the student as a subjective individual, obviously I understand parents have a huge impact. But wouldn't you be impressed if a girl who comes from a non-Frum background shows up and says, I want to be in a Frum school and I want to learn Torah? Like, I feel like you kind of...
In his defense, I understand where he's coming from, meaning I understand why
wanting to protect the student
meaning to
body.
say, like, listen, we're going to do a poor job at dealing with the situation over here. Although you could be the best, tzaddikas ever.
I think in general, you have to protect the majority, right? So if you're bringing in a majority of a certain type of hashkafa girls and it's concerning that one girl has a little bit of a difficult hashkafic background, and what if a girl wants to go over to their house? Like, I understand there are complications, like, definitely. But I think in that state, it was like, whatever, like, if you're going to judge me based off of who's showing up with me at the interview, and like, then obviously, like, this is just a sign that it's just not a good fit. And again, like, I have no negative feelings towards it because I ultimately went to the best school I could have ever asked for. I ended up going to Yeshiva Greater Washington in Silver Spring, Maryland. And my mother drove me 6 hours to Silver Spring to interview. And because it's a small town school, they were definitely open. And it was such like, if I can send my kids there without being boarders, I would. Like, I loved my school experience there. And I really believe that, like, Hashem really just put me where I needed to be. And that's how it happened. But it definitely took skill in trying to balance who I am, being a part of different worlds. I remember I was in camp and my mother came on visiting Sunday with her friend. And they weren't necessarily dressed to what the camp would have considered up to their modesty standard. And I remember sitting at the end of night activity, and there were the house mother sitting in front of me talking to somebody, not realizing I was sitting behind them, talking about how could this woman show up to visiting Sunday dressed like that, like her friend had to too. And I remember asking her to step outside with me because I wanted to say something.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And I remember saying, I was like, you didn't realize who's sitting behind you, but you're talking about my mother. And we talk about not talking Lashon Hara, and here you are. Like, how you never know who's listening. Like, if you're going to talk about somebody, make sure you're in a private room so nobody's overhearing you. And then, of course, the pity comes, and I was like, nah, like, come, I want to talk to you every night. Like, never to speak to me. No, I don't need to talk to you. I just wanted to let you know that you should be more mindful of your words because you don't know who's listening. And it's interesting because I never was angry at my mother for showing up like that. I was more frustrated at the world for not adapting the ahavas that we preach now of like every Jew is a Yid, and we take them as we're at. And again, I was never angry because I knew that it's just going to take the Frum world a while to catch up. It just happened to be I caught up a little faster. But the biggest balancing act was when the two worlds collide, right? Like, I'm getting engaged. Lord, now my mother and father are going to be in the same room. And that in itself was, Hashem has been so good to me. Like, I never thought my parents would walk me down the aisle together. Like that was okay. Like the apocalypse is coming, like, but it happened. And I think gradually as life moved on and as we matured and life events that you can't avoid, I'm not having 2 different weddings, right? Like I'm not going to have 2 different brisses for my kid, right? So it kind of forced time and life events kind of forced to bridge the gaps of the worlds together. But it was significantly easier when I was single because, okay, so I go Shabbos there, I go to Yom Tov there, like nothing had to blend. But it was more when I was older where it was like, okay, how are we going to do this? Like,
was there a long period between your parents not seeing each other, but then being forced to, I guess, by a simcha or something like that?
I think the first time they were civil and actually had a civil conversation was this past year at my son's bris. And I remember crying. So like, oh my gosh, this moment, like we've been waiting for this moment where we can have like a normal, like acknowledgement of existence. And I never thought that could happen. And I was so grateful that I got to be the vessel to make it happen. Obviously it took the both of them to, to really have and initiate and respond. But I don't think that would have happened otherwise.
It's interesting. What's your advice? Because I feel like you have a more extreme example of going through divorce than going through any child going through their parents getting divorced is not easy, but particularly in your case, it was harder than usual, I'd imagine, because it's just such different worlds. What advice would you give to someone who their parents are getting divorced now, or they're still fresh, that divorce? Like what do you tell them?
I think nowadays divorce is becoming increasingly common, unfortunately. Like I was a teacher for 8th grade and I think I only had one girl whose parents were together and she was like annoyed that she wasn't part of this like...
Hold on. The entire class, all the parents were divorced besides one?
Besides for like 1 or 2 girls. And,
wow.
And they were like, oh my gosh, like, I wish my parents were divorced. Because like it was like, okay, it's a cool thing now.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody's like crying together about how their parents are divorced. In terms of advice, it's hard because every situation is so different, right? And I can't relate to people who felt like it was their fault. But I would say is that the biggest thing that helped me was understanding that, again, talking in a situation where both parents are showing up for their kid and not abandoning a kid. And again, like I said, there's so many nuances, but in a situation where divorce is happening and your parents are showing up, remember to take in that love and everything that's getting said, right? Like people are in pain. So one parent might say something mean, another parent might say something mean, a grandmother might say something, an aunt might say something. To just remember that, like, as hard as it is, don't internalize that. Because that's not your parents. The people that they're talking about, those are people that you don't know. You only know the people who love you and take care of you right now. The people that they're talking about is a person that's coming through pain. So if you hear a relative or somebody talking smack about your parent, like, you don't know that person. You know the parent that's taking care of you and loving you, and they themselves have their own drama that they need to figure it out. But that's not your job to get involved. And for parents, like this is the biggest thing I can stress for parents who are getting divorced for their kid. Like, don't put your kid in the middle. Like they should not be your go-to speaker. Now, it happens to be in our situation, I did. There was a lot like, because my parents, for good and for worse, one would not want to speak with the other. And I definitely had to be the go-between for a lot of it. And it wasn't avoided because there was nobody on either side that was neutral enough that one of the sides would accept. But if you can find somebody to be in between, or even do it through emails where it's as least personal as possible, like don't ask questions about how the other parent is doing. Like they shouldn't have to update you about the ex's life, right? Like you're living your life, they're living their life, and now your kid is going and spending time. And they shouldn't have to be your informant of like, okay, what are they doing, right? Like, what are they up to? Or who are they dating, right?
Like a mini spy.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I feel like in your particular position, you kind of had to have sort of like a parent role in the relationship, as weird as it sounds, because you're the child, but like you're also kind of being the adult in the situation because there's fighting going on and you're just trying to make sure that everything goes as smooth as possible.
It's actually funny. I would like walk with my father in the street and people would ask if he's going on a date.
Oh, wow.
I don't know because I looked really mature or because like, why is he walking with like,
It's usually because people are just dumb.
It was
That's
just
why.
like, but at the same time, like I definitely filled a role, right? Like that is special, like, because it was only me. My siblings weren't coming along. So we would go on all these adventures together and we would be partners in crime, right? So like it was for somebody who hasn't seen him for a long time and knows he's divorced and doesn't know that he has a daughter that's a teenager or whatnot, it would be like, you know, like who you're walking with. But there was definitely a nurturing role that I felt like I took on. There was a lot of things as the eldest, right? That like I want to protect my siblings from when they were coming for Shabbosim, to one parent or the other. And I think in general, your life circumstances makes you mature and encourages you to grow up a bit. Not that that's always a good thing. So I think anybody going through a divorce is going to find some level of maturity in them for having to deal with certain situations that a kid in a healthy, happy home wouldn't have to. And I think that's just unavoidable.
Mm-hmm. My favorite part with Henchy is coming up. But before we jump back into this episode, let's talk about the Wheels to Lease, the smartest way to get your next car. A car can easily become one of your biggest unnecessary expenses, and 2026 is coming, and we want you to spend wisely. Between hidden fees, inflated lease rates, and confusing terms, people end up overpaying thousands. And that's why I always tell people, you got to go with the people that you could trust. And you can trust Wheels to Lease. They know the market, they negotiate the real numbers on your behalf, and they get you the best possible deal. You tell them the car you want, they find it, secure the pricing, and handle the paperwork. Maybe you're not sure which car. They'll talk it out with you and they'll find the best bang for your buck. No hanging, no games, just real savings. So whether you need a luxury SUV, a family van, or your first lease, Wheels to Lease makes the whole process simple and honest. Reach out to Wheels to Lease at 718-871-8715, 718-871-8715. Of course, you can send them an email, inspire@wheelstolease.com, or you go on the website, wheelstolease.com/inspire, or you can send Saul a WhatsApp directly in our show notes. Now, we're all about making your life better, more enjoyable, more that you could connect to Hashem with at Living L'Chaim. How am I going to transition this into an ad? Well, I'll tell you about it. Most companies run on systems that are slow, outdated, and pieced together. Creates stress, wasted time, confused staff, and work that should take minutes ends up taking hours. Silly. And it's not just the back end. Your onboarding, scheduling, billing, inventory, communication, reporting, customer experience, all of it depends on the right system. If one part is clunky, the whole operation feels heavy. This is where BitBean is different. They do not give you random software. They learn your entire operation, see where things break down, and build tools that make everything smoother. I personally am dealing with a real estate project, and I see clearly they need custom software built for them. Front office, back office, the whole workflow, medical offices, nursing homes, law firms, real estate, logistics, retail, whatever you run, they have built systems for companies just like yours. Trust me, faster processes, cleaner organization, happy staff, fewer mistakes, more revenue. They offer a free consultation, zero pressure, just real insight into how your business can run better. Reach out today at bitbean.com. You will not regret it, and they will help you live a happier life with having more time with smarter custom software. Bitbean.com. Now back to this week's episode.
How did your childhood experience shape who you were looking for when you were dating?
So I think a lot of people are very nervous about me finding a shidduch. Like, how is she going to find somebody Chasidish, not Frum? Like, who's going to want her? I was not worried. Like I said, like my relationship with Hashem was like so strong that I was like, I am so not worried. Like, if you want to be worried, gesundheit, like, I'm not going to like indulge in that. But I definitely made me look for somebody who's open-minded. And I don't just mean that everybody's looking for a nice, open-minded person, but like somebody who was willing to embrace. I find people are easier to embrace a non-religious person than Chasidish. And when I mean Chasidish, I'm talking about you're coming to a Würzburger Shabbaton with like, my dad is one of 11, you know, with a whole bunch of Streimels, everybody speaking Yiddish. It can be intimidating. You know, you're the only black hatter amongst Streimels. Like, we were just in Monroe for Shabbos, you know, with a whole bunch of sour people. And my husband is really just like chilling there. And it takes a character to be able to not be intimidated and to just embrace it and not just stand on the sidelines, but engage. I was really nervous because I'm so close with both sides of my family that I didn't want a spouse that's just going to sit, that I need to babysit and like feel like I need to take care of at a simcha. I wanted somebody who's gonna, okay, like it takes getting used to, but somebody who's not gonna be afraid to jump in and just like dive into it. And I started actually dating when I was 17, but I knew I was going to seminary. So I wasn't dating, but I was dating because I think my experience really just made me want my own home where I
Hold on, I'm curious. 17, I
graduated at 17.
Is that more of a Chasidish thing? Is that more of a
No.
not from thing? Like,
no,
which world is that?
I'll tell you what it was. It was this desperate need to create a home that was aligned with the vision that I had, right? Because I'm split. I'm in Hashkafa. I'm obviously not Chasidish, but I have the high missionists and I love my Chasidish family. I'm not Frum, and I want to live a Frum lifestyle, but I love my not Frum family. And I desperately just wanted to create a shalom bias that like lived to my expectations, that I was desperate for it. Like I just wanted that space where I can be me fully without having to live half a Shabbos in one house or live an uncomfortable Shabbos experience by having to like watch what I say and watch what I'm exposed to, because I do have a smartphone and I'm going to Williamsburg, like I am trying to balance that. And also like, going home for Shabbos, but like not wanting everybody to not be on their phones because I'm home. Like, why should I have to enforce my frumkai on them? And again, both sides were super accommodating and super respectful. And like, I would bring my single friends over to my mother's house and would have like Shabbatones in my mother's house. Like we would have an amazing time, but I just desperately wanted a space that was mine. So that definitely fueled this desire of dating young, which it didn't end up happening anyway. I went to seminary. I was in Israel for 2 years. I went out with somebody while I was there, came back, and I was dating for about 2-3 years. And it was very hard because even though I was dating so like for some people like short, like I got engaged by I think 21 or 22, that's like decent, like that's a decent age. But it was hard because there weren't a lot of options that were suggested to me. So I felt like it was very I couldn't do anything. Like I did my shalas, I was still kind of, but like finding that person that was really going to embrace both sides, like people were very intimidated by it. I actually made my own shidduch. It was just like working out just fine.
Did you get shachanas from yourself?
No, we actually paid. I found him on Shabbat.com, funny enough. Shout out to Rabbi Klatsko.
Sure.
So we donated to like Shabbat.com.
Sure. Okay.
Again, not intentionally. Like I actually tried setting him up with a friend. Like I was going through a 6-month rut and COVID just hit. And I was like, okay, if I'm not going out with anybody, then I need to live vicariously through my friends. So how do you find boys? I'm like, okay, I'll just go on whatever websites had boy profiles. And that's what I went on. And I came across this profile and I was like, oh, he's from Florida. Okay. So I have friends in Florida. And then he's heavily involved in NCSY. He's the director right now in San Antonio, and that's where we live. So I was like, oh, Kiriv, okay, open-minded, chill, like embracing total different cultures, but like again, the Chasidish aspect, I don't know. And we did a video chat and we Zoom called and we like spoke, and it didn't throw him off. He's never met a Chasidish person until he got married to me. That's beside the point. So he didn't know what he had to be scared of. And then we dated from the day we met to the day we got married was 4 months. Our chuppah was in Florida, and then we flew to Vishnitz in Borough Park to have the rest of the wedding. So we actually had like 2 separate weddings in one day. Flying in your wedding gown is definitely an experience.
That's fun.
So we had like that Florida, like his side of the family, and my side, like heavily Chasidish during COVID, like hashash. And he really rocked it. Like it was really smooth. Like Hashem made it so easy for me. Obviously going through loneliness and being single at any stage is hard, but I was very lucky to find somebody at a time that I needed it and was not looking, and they showed up.
And then professionally, you mentioned that you do this kind of stuff. I mean, not necessarily this exact example, but tell us about that, how that flowed into your professional life.
So throughout my entire life, people felt comfortable sharing their challenges with me at a very young age, to the point where now as an adult, it was very unhealthy for me. because I would view myself older than I am, which meant that like, oh, I know more things than I should. And like, I'm more mature and like, I can handle things that I don't need to. And really like an 11-year-old should not be giving advice to an adult, like it's just not healthy. And I'm glad that my advice seemingly was in line and helpful for people. But it made my head grow a lot. I was like, oh, I am so good at what I do. I'm so young and I'm advising other people. And thanking Hashem for having this like clarity and being able to see people's lives in a different way. I wanted that to translate into my career. So I always knew I wanted to go into counseling. I really wanted to go into marriage and relationships because I'm really passionate about having people create healthy, long-lasting relationships. And I think when done right, when knowing what to look out for, when knowing what you need and what you don't need, what you should focus on and what you shouldn't focus on, I really think it just saves so many challenges later on. I've had clients who are super Chasidish, second marriage to not Jew, like definitely have very diverse clientele, but it all translates the same of everybody wants a happy, healthy relationship. What do I need to do to get it? And not only that, but what am I able to compromise on? What am I not able to compromise on? And I think that if both my parents were in a space where they had those resources and tools to be aware. Now, Baruch Hashem, they ended up together because I would not be here if they weren't, right? Hashem always has a plan. But to keep a relationship going, and not that I think they should have stayed together, but I think that if they had the resources, then maybe they would make different choices where they wouldn't have had to go through all the pain that they did. And other people would also save themselves a lot of the pain. And if Hashem made it happen and had to happen, okay, shine. So now how do we go on from that after? Even now, like being able to advise people, like if people are going through this divorce process where there is such an extreme difference of hashkafos and private mediation, like I would do that, like help people find ways where they can create healthy relationships for their family when making life choices, right? When a parent makes a drastic life choice, it impacts everybody around them. And you can't say, well, you can't make that choice until your kid's 18 because that hurts them mentally and emotionally. And then your kid's anyway not going to be happy. But I think the biggest challenge is, okay, well, if I'm changing my life so drastically, then how I'm raising my kid right now, how I thought I wanted to raise them and how I wanted to raise them right now is very different than my ex right now. And I think that's where the struggle lies for a lot of people within this niche is I'm from, somebody else is not from. I'm changing my mind how I should raise them. But you still have to take in your ex's opinion into account. Well, then how do you find a happy medium without your kid coming out confused and resentful and upset and frustrated or isolating one parent over the other? And I think that's really the main goal as to why I came on here is to shed some clarity about this scenario. I remember when I was in 12th grade, I went on Beis Yaakov convention. And I shared like a tidbit of my life of how my parents are on different spectrums of religiosity. And I remember a girl coming up to me. And if you're listening, I'm still looking for you. Like, I wish I know your name. And she started crying on my shoulder. She's just like, nobody knows. My parents are still married, but my parent is not from. And I didn't know anybody else like me's out there. I thought I was the only one. And that's the inspiration till today as to why I'm on here, is for that girl to know that she's not. Forget about divorce. People know about divorce. People are talking about divorce. People are talking about not going from. But nobody is really talking about when you have a parent that's from and the other isn't. And what are the resources is for the kid to deal with that? Or for the parent? And that's really my motivation for being here today, is letting people know that A, they're not alone. And B, if you need resources, like, use me, use my experience, because it can be so painful thinking that you're alone and navigating, especially like Yiddishkeit is so close to our soul. And when we don't know what to do with it, it can be super painful.
No, it's funny because sometimes when people are so connected with those around them, it gives them a bigger appreciation for Hashem. And then sometimes when people feel so isolated, that also maybe in your case, you feel so appreciative of Hashem, and like you could have been maybe angry at Hashem or confused, which I'm sure there was those kinds of feelings, but you kind of, and you're saying it throughout the interview, like talking as if, because it is the case that Hashem was your friend, your Hashem,
my therapist, my mentor, my personal,
you're everything,
like,
what he is.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to see like how you reacted to it, and you use that to grow your relationship with Hashem and not sulk in the loneliness or confusion. And
I think people have a choice. You can use Hashem as your support system, or you can use Hashem as your source of blame. Both are very good options. But I find that one is temporary and your pain stays, whereas one is harder, but it allows you to be happy at the end because you're able to move on from something when you feel like you have somebody by your side and able to just take the burden off your shoulders to somebody else. When it got too hard, I would go on a run and just be like, Hashem, I'm giving it to you. Like, I can't deal with it. Otherwise, I'll be crying for a week straight. So you need to take it from me because I can't deal with this right now. And I'm so grateful that of all ironies, that my mother was the one that created that for me. And she also was the big reason why I was able to make that journey. You know, she showed up to my school interviews. She bought me kosher food. She would make shabbos. Even now, we're staying by her for the summer. She has a whole separate kosher kitchen for us to stay in. Like, it definitely takes having an amazing parent to be able to put their own desires, thoughts aside, and to really feel like, you know what, even though my daughter's a teenager, she seems to know her own mind, and I want to help her develop that, putting her own pain aside with religion or Judaism or etc. And I'm forever grateful for that. And if I had to be in the situation, I have the best parents to be in it with.
They're beautiful. Before we end, like one or two more questions. Do you remember the hardest moment of all of this? Was there like one moment?
I don't think there was one moment, but I do think that there's one moment that's coming to mind right now. It was the first time that I found out that my mother was not from anymore. We were living in Muncie, and I don't know the specifics if she was coming home or I was coming downstairs, and I saw my mother wearing jeans, smoking on the porch. Now, smoking also is a huge, like, when do you see a Frum person smoke unless you're in Israel? Or even that. Like, it was just, I remember being like, okay. So this is happening. Like, this is her right now. And it wasn't that it was the hardest moment, but it was the moment where I realized that I had to make a choice. Because a choice is coming. It's either I'm going to follow in her footsteps in terms of, you know, my siblings going to public school and journeying in that direction, or I'm going to fight for something else. And at that moment, I realized what my answer was. And that was probably like the transformative moment of making my choice. In terms of emotionally hard, I think it's just hard hearing the people that you love being talked about in a negative way. You know, people have comments to say, somebody's a shiksa, like, look at her, or, you know, like, what's wrong with her father for doing XYZ, or why is he doing that? And that's hard because you see your parents as your parents and you love them. And when somebody's making comments, thinking that you're not hearing them, that's really hard. Whether you're at a family simcha, people think you can't hear them because they're whispering loudly, or you're in camp, or you're anywhere. Like, I think that's the thing that hurts the most because you don't see your parents that way. I don't see my mother as a shiksa wearing pants. I see my mother who loves me, that made a choice. Who gives you the right to comment on her choices, or vice versa? Like, My father did some things that were very painful to swallow down. But you're not in it, so who are you to comment on it? You want to help? Ask me what you can do for me. Don't make comments. And if you are going to do it as far away as possible where nobody can hear it.
I totally hear that. Well, I also think it's unbelievable that we're having this conversation and no one could see, but your mother's right over there and you're able to have this conversation with her there. I think it speaks to both of you and how beautiful your relationship is, and the fact that your mother came and potentially maybe we'll do, I don't want to give any spoilers away. Maybe we'll do a part 2 with others here. But thank you so much for coming and opening and sharing. And if someone does want to reach out to you, whether they're going through something or whether they want to say not something dumb to you, or they want advice, or maybe they want to, get therapy, whatever it is, what's the best way that they could reach you?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram.
Okay. We'll link it below, but you could say it for those listening.
Henchy Cohen. Henchy 2.0 is my private one. So if you're following me already. And then email is always great. It's cohenhenchy@gmail.com, which you can also write in the comments.
Sure.
And just like a last thing, like really, like if anybody has questions, if people want help in terms of mediation, like that's a service I offer in counseling, or just somebody to talk to for guidance or clarity. Like my sole purpose on here is not to get like this star of like fame. Like I really just like, I keep thinking back to that girl who really thought she was alone in this scenario. And as a niche of it is, I'm sitting here, I speak Yiddish and English. I live in San Antonio, Texas, where there's like one Jew. And you can really have a happy ending. And it's all about how you look at it and what you have at your disposal. And I'm ready to be a disposal for other people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
If you reached the far end of this episode, let us know. And I want you to know, Henchy Cohen will be looking at this episode. And I tell all the people, like people want to reach out and they want to say something. The best way to do that is in our YouTube comments. So if you want to give her love, give her support, use the YouTube comments. And to tell me that you reached this far, use the word wow in your comments, or just say the word wow so I know that you got this far, because that's what I think about when I think of Henchy. Also, by the way, I don't push this enough, but if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. We like it. It gives us chizuk. Every time you we get a thumbs up, a malach from YouTube comes down and gives us a high five. So, okay, that's not true, but I don't know. It does good stuff for the algorithm. So give us a like also. Now, before I get to my personal takeaway, I want to thank the sponsors of this week's episode. Wheels Lease. If you need a car, go to them. United Food Health Share. I know it's new, it's different, but it might be for you. BitBean, really smart custom software for your company. And hiring for less. It's intimidating to hire full-time staff, but you know what? There is an inexpensive way to really get a lot more done. Now, there's a quiet strength in some people that you can feel before they even open their mouths. Henchy Cohen is one of those people. Henchy grew up in a Hasidic home, surrounded by tradition, community, and the rhythm of Yiddishkeit. But life changed suddenly when her parents divorced and her mother left religious life. For many children, that kind of shake in the foundation can pull them in every direction, can create confusion, resentment, or a feeling of being torn between two worlds. But Henchy chose something remarkable. She held on to her faith with both hands, not out of stubbornness, not out of fear, but out of clarity. Even as a young child, she understood that her connection to Hashem was hers, not dependent on anyone, not conditional, not fragile, hers. At the same time, she did something that was just as extraordinary. She built and protected healthy, loving relationships with both of her parents. She never chose sides. She never allowed pain to turn her heart cold. She understood that honoring her parents and honoring herself could coexist. That love can survive even when circumstances change. That balance takes emotional courage, takes maturity well beyond her years, and takes a deeper inner confidence that very few people develop, even as adults. Today, Henchy stands as a proud Frum woman, not because life made it easy, not because her path was straight, but because she chose her identity with conviction and heart. She is living proof that challenges do not define us, choices do. Henchy reminds us that every person has a story, and every story has a moment where the light could have gone out. Instead, she turned her challenges into source of strength. Henchy held on to faith, onto her family, and onto herself. Her journey teaches us that no matter where you come from, no matter what twist your life takes, and I know we all have twists in our lives. You can build a future rooted in clarity, anchored in love, and filled with pride in who you are. Henchy Cohen is not just proud from women, she's a reminder of what resilience looks like, what courage looks like, and what a Yiddish neshama looks like when it refuses to give up its light. Remember, inspiration is literally everywhere. L'chaim.
Living L'chaim.